so to speak, but you know, you have attorneys that donate to judges' elections and things such as that. You have issues where the question that Mr. Dolcefino even brought up, how that influences judges' decisions in the courtroom, assignments of court fees to two different parties.
The court fees sometimes are addressed and awarded punitively, and to discourage a person. I recently picked up a case where they really tried to break this woman's spirit. It was only after speaking with her and agreeing to help her with her situation that she became like she had hope again. And in that case, and I don't mind discussing because it's public record, but in that case, the associate judge awarded primary custody of a child who was being probably sexually abused by her father, awarded him primary custody, and I believe sought to cover it up with an SPO. That I believe they believed that my client couldn't challenge it. I think may have found a way that may work for them. But unfortunately, in law school, which I went through a few decades back, family law is kind of like a stepchild. And it wasn't something I was told going to corporate law. I was told take as much tax and procedures you can stand. That's what I did. But it's come to me recently that family law is probably the most important area of the law, really to understand and to try to apply it to try to help people. Because I went to law school because I wanted to help somebody. I said if I can help one person the time I'm living, then it's worth it. Call me home or whatever you're gonna do. But my objective was not to get rich, it was to help at least one person, and maybe eat good along the way.
Well, I think what you're saying is really true. I mean, with one stroke of the pen, a child's life and a parent's life can be affected greatly, and the decisions that are being made in the family court, so to speak, are very important decisions. And as you said earlier, I don't know from a scientific standpoint if the adversarial process is always going to serve the child best or serve the family best.
I think not. I think by its very nature, there's an idea of winning and losing. And no one wants to lose.
Right.
But in a family law situation, the person who most deserves to win is the child.
Is the child.
Not mama, not daddy, not the lawyers, not the psychiatrist, not the AG's office, but the child.
And if I could mention, I mean, one of the big advantages for the child when you talk about the controversial subjects in the state of Texas about shared parenting or 50-50 is that right now it seems like the decision-making for the child is almost political in a way, you know, because the big advertisement that we hear commonly is like, if the parents don't get along, then, you know, 50-50 or shared parenting or maximizing the time for the child just can't work. And one of the things that really occurs when you start maximizing or equalizing the time of the child with both parents, it really pulls the child out of any potential conflict, because then there's no fight for, so to speak, fight for the child. The child is no longer a part of that conflict, and the child also is able to have much more what they call face-to-face time, parenting time, and the child then develops a real life perspective, their own opinions about each parent, and also they develop their own personality and their own self-identity when they develop these relationships. And that really speaks to how to keep the child out of this so-called politics of the parents. And because, as we know, divorce, separation is traumatic, and then you put a couple either divorcing or separating, trying to establish some parenting rights, and that whole process is very traumatic to anybody.
I think it's ill-suited to solving problems between people. I believe that if you have committed and ethical professionals, that there is a way to do it. I don't know that it can be done within the current structure system in court, but it can be done externally and maybe sought seeks court approval later, once the people come together. Mediation seems to work a little bit, because in mediation, I know I was certified as a mediating territorial court in the Virgin Islands. In mediation, parents sometimes can get it all out, can get in their say, can say what they want to the other parent. You come up with an agreement that is between the parents, and then you seek approval from the court for that agreement that they reached. That may be a little bit more workable, but I believe in Texas, in order to deviate from the SPO, you got to give reasons. It's like, this applies unless you can say why it shouldn't apply. And what should apply is 50-50 parenting, which is what you talked about. I think we talked about that at the seminar where I met you guys.
It minimizes conflict.
Yes.
In a 50-50 scenario, the exposure from one parent to another, it's minimized. If you go week to week, or in my case, I have 50-50 parental plan with my ex. We see each other every 3.5 days. But at this point, we actually share parenting so much it's whenever he's available. If he's available on a certain day and I pick him up and I could take him to the park or I could do activities, even if it's on her possession time, she's okay with it. And then, you know, she's got plans and they're on my possession days, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. I mean, if you have equal shared parenting, that does away with a lot of conflict. It does. It's very beneficial to the child.
And that's backed up by some of the scientific research that you'll see declining rates of parental conflict. And actually one of the prominent researchers in Arizona shows that, William Fabricius, who's done some studies after Arizona went to 50-50 back in 2013. Another thing I guess that comes up is concern about judicial discretion. That's usually another counter argument concerning
the garbage can. I call it the garbage can of the law.
Okay.
It's whatever the judge's mood is that day.
Right.
There's no guidelines, any discretion. As a matter of fact, discretion was one of the reasons that I lost my zest for practicing on the Virgin Islands. Whenever it was discretionary, it seemed to go against me. And you know, I'm thinking, I've had judges just rules that they don't like it, appeal me. And many conscientious judges do not like to be reversed on appeal. But you have those few who appeal me. They don't understand people have to pay for your time and things like that. Costs money. And there's a matter right now that I have. The client is we deposit money in the registry of the court. I'm trying to get some money out of the registry of the court to be paid for the substantial preparation I got to do. And I'm going to have to go to appeals court to get a hearing on my motion. Because the judge won't have a hearing on my motion. And I've had to fight that tooth and nail, but anyway. Orlando, tell us more about your, because you had a law enforcement background, right?
Yeah.
And you went to court and thought you didn't need a lawyer, right?
I've been in uniform for over 20 years, and you know, just like you know, it's not about the money; it's about helping people. And yeah, I didn't need a lawyer. I mean, I have a clean background. I've got a government clearance, to carry firearms inside federal buildings and protect assets from the federal government and its employees and its visitors. But when I went to court, I was given the standard possession order. I was found, for some reason, that day I was found that the standard possession order was in the best interest of the child. And yeah, I went through the appeals process. I went to court several times. I think it was 4 different judges that I actually went before. But the first judge that I went to, I questioned him. I said, "How did you reach your conclusion? How did you make this decision on the standard possession order? You first have to find me unfit. I'm here for equal possession." He said, "Well, in this society, it's the female who's the primary caretaker." And I said, "You just ruled on gender." I said, "You can't do that." He said, "Well, I'm not going to argue with it." And I have the actual transcripts of that. Yeah. And then I appealed it and sent it to the appellate court, and they said, "Well, you know, judge's discretion, judicial discretion." I said, "No, it's not." But you know, if I'm going to throw that into the Supreme Court, it's probably not going to be heard. But
well, you know, I think the answer to all of this is it's what they did in Houston in November. Now, I am, as you can see from my intro, I am actually a card-carrying Republican, for real. For real. But from what I have learned about the family court system in Harris County, they got rid of all the Republican judges, family and criminal.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, as far as I'm concerned, they needed to go.
Right.
I mean, if you're there administrating and not judging, and you're doing crazy things, and you may or may not be on the up and up on everything, you need to go and get some people in there who at least begin to care,
Right.
and at least act like they care.
I guess one thing that comes to my mind in the judiciary system, the adversarial system that exists, it's very dichotomous, you know. In this system, when parents go through this, one is going to be labeled the bad person or relative bad person to the other person. And it's not always like that. And as you were talking about judges and mentioning the issue of family law, everything is on a spectrum. I think certainly there are those attorneys and there are those judges that do the best they can. They have some ethical basis, but they're in a system that's almost like they can't control the system.
The system is rigged.
Right. And then I wonder, there are many advocates that talk about, you know, what's really the underlying force that drives this, you know, and earlier we were talking about the issue of, the issue of, on many occasions, what's come up is the issue of Title 4D, how that's involved, how that's connected to the issue of child support, how there has to be a relative absence of one parent, and there's many other people that are more knowledgeable and expertise at that than myself, but I think Orlando probably has a little bit more knowledge than myself about this. But the underlying force, and I think what we're dealing with now, are the symptoms in which kids are being torn apart from their parents, the potential outcomes of this system could be much worse for kids, particularly in just sole custody situations. Not all, there are exceptions, compared to maximizing parental time. And I think a term that's been brought about by Laura Adler, which I thought was very wise, was the issue of maximizing parental time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're using 50-50 in shared parenting, but even looking at couples that are together or married, not all the time do both parents share exactly the equal time with the child. You know, one or both may have careers, or one may have a career, the other stay home. But they both dedicate as much time they can to the child, and the child has both parents as much as possible compared to the current system. So I think what we're dealing with is, over generations, what's becoming more, society's becoming more aware, particularly those that are gaining so much knowledge, is these are symptoms in kids, these are symptoms in parents. We see, you know, devastating effects emotionally, psychologically on parents and kids that go through this system.
Well, I was at a seminar, presentation today by the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. They had several breakout sessions. I went to the one on, I think it was juvenile justice and the law. And my conservative brethren are beginning to realize that it's better to try to solve these family problems early, these problems with children early, to save some societal costs later on. Now, of course, my Democratic friends, they try to vilify Republicans at every chance they get. Say, well, they're really trying to get you off social welfare programs. Yes, they want you to be free and do it for yourself and do it for your own. But unfortunately, there are occasions where you come in contact with the criminal justice system or the family law justice or injustice system, because I believe that the SPO itself codifies creating one super parent and one not so good parent.
The inequality, yeah.
Even in
It
instances,
codifies.
even in an instance where parents, and this goes out throughout the states. I do a lot of voluntary work for the Texas Fathers' Rights Movement, a lot of volunteer work for Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. And there's about 15 to 20 members on a crisis line from the Texas Fathers, or for the Fathers' Rights Movement, to where we take crisis calls, suicide calls from parents all over the country.
Suicide calls?
Right. Yeah, it's a suicide hotline, people in crisis. And it's a huge vetting process to be actually one of these members. And I'm lucky to have the experience and the training to be able to be one of these members. And when I talk to parents, this is what I found out, that this is just nationwide, that even if you are awarded the standard possession order, it doesn't guarantee you're going to see your
property of some sort.
Right.
Awarded.
Yeah, awarded. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to interact with your child. It doesn't guarantee that your child's going to have minimum access to the parent, because interference with child custody, which is a felony, a state jail felony in Texas, it's in the penal code under section 2503. It's not enforced. It's not enforced in the entire state of Texas. I put a lot of data. I've got other parents that I work with too. I know, I think you've met George Saldana and Mike Clifton has done extensive work on interference with child custody. And the laws are there. The laws are there for DAs to prosecute, but they don't. They say it's a civil matter, even though, I mean, it is sitting in the penal code. That's the
And some of it is incorporated into court orders.
Right, it is. It's incorporated in every court order. But even if you have the standard possession order, right? If you have the standard possession order, if you have it expanded, even if you have shared custody, if one parent just wants to play games and not abide by that court-ordered possession schedule, that child will never see that other parent.
And thank God for all the work they do, because now there's a lot of work being done on that aspect and trying to reform that part. And he's right. Even if you maximize parenting time and one parent withholds the child from the other parent, the non-custodial parent, so to speak, one difference, it would be a bigger impact, because the non-custodial parent in that shared parenting situation has so much more percentage of time, and vice versa, the child has so much more percentage of time. But still, if it's not enforced, the child goes without seeing the parent, and that rides into a whole nother sector of this overall subject, is the issue of parental alienation. Mm-hmm. You know, the codes themselves right now are kind of auto-catalyzing in the alienation effect because of the relative disproportion percentages that occur of parental exposure for the child. But again, you start having parental conflict, or even just one unhealthy parent for one reason or another decides to overtly stop the child from seeing the other parent. It greatly harms the child, greatly harms the parent-child relationship, and it's very devastating to the parent. You know, one argument you hear, I think, a lot is the parents, you know, there's this drive for shared parenting or maximizing time because parents want to avoid child support. There is really nothing wrong with wanting to be a parent. You know, a good parent wants to be a good parent. A good parent wants to nurture and promote their child's health and do what they believe within ethical guidelines is required. And we all know that that issue of child support is codified in 2 different sections of the family code. No matter what percentage of, and you know, what percentage of parenting a non-custodial parent has, they're going to pay 20% of their net income regardless. I mean, that's how it's calculated.
It's 20% for the standard possession order, it's 20% for the expanded possession order, and it's 20% for equal shared parenting.
And it would be a financial disadvantage, actually, if you did that and you had shared parenting, because you're taking on the extra cost of raising the child. So it doesn't make sense, that argument.
So there's going to be a need for extensive legislative changes.
We're hoping. We're hoping. Well, a lot of good people are working very hard at many different aspects of this, not only in Texas but in many other states. And some of the more prominent leaders, like Linda Nielsen out of Wake Forest, there's a whole organization of women leading Women for Shared Parenting. Women of all different professions, walks of life, get together.
Well, listen, you work with a Men's for Shared Parenting group, right? And there's a Women's for Shared Parenting group. Well, I would just like to see a situation where the parents are put more in charge rather than judicial discretion.
You mean like more autonomy?
Yeah.
Yeah, more autonomy.
Yeah. Because right now, it seems to me as if parents are at the mercies of the lawyers, the judges, and the professionals. It only takes one greedy lawyer to hype up their client to think that they can defeat someone. And if one parent defeats the other one, the child loses. Period.
Right. Yeah.
The child doesn't win.
Right.
It's almost like it's no win for the child, which could not be in the child's best interest. Not to be able for the child to come out ahead.
And if it happens that custodial parent happens to be the unhealthier one, and the paradox about that is usually the most unhealthy or the best deceptive. The best deceptive of the judges and the attorneys.
Right. And in family court, it's not how strong your case is, it's who's the better liar.
Right.
Who can lie to the judge.
I was in the truth is something I have that I have a hang-up about. And I was in a mediation with a guy who's a judge. He was a former judge. And he told me, it's out of his mouth, he says, if the parties leave the courthouse equally unhappy, I've probably done justice. No, you do justice, you figure out who's telling the truth and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
Justice has to start with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to figure out, let's say, for example, I'm a judge. I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to listen to you. I'll just figure out what you want and figure out what you want. And no one gets exactly what they want. So you're equally unhappy.
But then see,
have I judged it all?
I don't. But then again,
I don't have to listen.
Now you're focusing on the parents. It would be, I think, a better world
Right.
if they would just focus on the child.
On the child.
Instead of this, as you said earlier, adversarial system in which both parents are essentially trying to put down the other parent, in front of the judge to decide who's going to be the better parent. To eliminate that, to start with a rebuttable presumption of maximizing or shared parenting, and if there's clear and convincing evidence that challenge that, involving violence or direct harm to the child, then challenge it. But no, I think the current system is overall harming kids.
Well, to me, there's no doubt when you look at what kids are doing nowadays or not doing.
Mm-hmm. And the statistics show it.
And the achievement levels and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really bothers me about all of it, this is not a black issue, white issue, brown issue. This is a community issue.
Mm-hmm.
It affects everybody.
It does. It affects everybody. It's a societal problem.
On every social level, too. One of the things, in my experience, that I found very, very strange is that when I've gone to civil court and criminal court, the hearings are about facts. They're absolutely about facts. But when you go to family court, it's about arguments. It's not about facts. It's about arguments. And I said, wait a minute. This hearing is supposed to be about facts, not arguments. Only in family court will you find an atmosphere, an environment where it's not about facts. They don't want to hear about facts. They want to hear about arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really odd. I was exposed to civil and criminal.
Now, Orlando, that's my point exactly. My point is, I believe that lawyers and judges, if they behave professionally and responsibly, that many of these problems and difficulties that we face could be eliminated.
Right,
Could
correct.
be eliminated.
There's strong opposition, and it's vibrant opposition to a rebuttable presumption of shared parenting.
It is.
And I think maybe others can speak better to this than myself in my limited time of independently going to the Capitol. I think maybe for decades there's been this narrative that's been created over and over and over and over again to the point it's brainwashing. And for a long time, until recently, thanks to a lot of good people, that the legislatures are beginning to realize maybe the previous messages that they've been receiving aren't so true. There's the validity of these messages are being challenged. And many advocates are really bringing factual information to the legislatures and showing the legislators that maybe the narrative that they previously thought was true is not. They're good. One of the researchers, Linda Nielsen, uses the word the woozle.
I've read the paper,
false
the woozle.
message. Yeah, the false message that repeatedly over and over to the point that you believe it, even if it's false.
In one of my hearings, in my petition to modify, one of the district judge in Travis County, asked me, well, what are you here for? And I said, well, I'm here for equal possession from the standard possession order. And she said, well, it was standard possession order is 165 days a year possession for the non-custodial. And I said, no, it's not.
Right.
I said, if you would look at my supporting documents, I went ahead and entered them. It's in the court clerk's record. I broke it down in charts, and I break it down, and it clearly states that the custodial parent has 80%, non-custodial has 20%, and he expanded. He said, even if we go to expanded, it's still 60-40. He said, I can't be an effective parent if I'm only doing it 20% of the time. She was under the impression that the standard possession order granted a non-custodial parent 165 days a year possession. And I could only assume that her source has been throughout the years is the opposition to family law reform, which is the lobbyists. Yeah, it's dangerous. The information that they put out there is absolutely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous.
Because 20%, I mean, that's similar, that scientifically in that realm is defined as sole custody situation, practically. To be effective, the non-custodial parent has to have at least 35% parenting time with the child. And for the child to have a better outcome. And that's proven and advocated for by many of the researchers in the United States.
You know, I remember this one kid who was always getting in trouble, and he would always get in trouble at school, and of course, he'd have to get law enforcement called out there to him. But the first person that they would call, because his mom worked during the day, was his dad. So when you try to work with him, he said, well, what's going on with you? And he said, well, I get in trouble. That's the only time I can see my dad. So you guys called him over here. I said, so, you know, if I want to see my dad more, that's what I got to do. I said, I got to do what I got to do. If I got to get in trouble to see my dad.
Which puts the kid in a heck of a position.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it does.
And they shouldn't be in that position.
He's a juvenile now. He's got a criminal record as a juvenile because he's doing whatever it takes to see his father.
His dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I could see why he's doing it. I understand completely why he's doing it, but he doesn't understand that he's going to take that record with him the rest of his life.
You know, the other side of a similar anecdotal experience, as you know, I'm a child psychiatrist, and with patients, families that we see, the effect of a loss of a parent, we're very attuned to. And we see a lot of teenagers and young adults, and even if they had a loss of a parent or grew up in a situation which was sole custody, it still affects them throughout their late teens, throughout their early 20s. And there is significant mental health consequences to these situations, and particularly when you get into the realm of parental alienation, where one parent purposely attempts to sabotage in one way or another the child's relationship with the other parent, whether it's like withholding custody, 2503 violation, or more subvert, I guess you could say, as what's been described, brainwashing of the child against the other parent. It's very devastating.
David, I had
impact.
a question.
Sure.
And I thought that while we've been sitting here talking, did you focus on psychiatry, adult, child psychiatry, before or after your experience with the course?
I've been a practicing child psychiatrist for about 22 years, and actually what got me into child psychiatry is when I was in my adult training in Nashville. I worked in a county jail, worked at the Davidson County Jail at night, probably 3 or 4 times a week. And at that time, they had the juvenile offenders in the basement and in an adult jail. And these were juvenile offenders convicted of capital crimes, murder. But even at that point, in talking with them, they had this, it was a connection. You know, they were still influenceable to reform, and they still wanted to change their life, even though they were about ready to have some pretty negative consequences brought down on them. And then from that, I became very invested in juvenile justice, and that's what led me to go into child training. And then after that, it diversified, and I've been practicing in many realms, and I still practice in a juvenile justice center on a weekly basis, but I've been a practicing psychiatrist in juvenile justice centers all of my career. And you see some pretty devastating things, and you hear about pretty devastating family circumstances. But in the other part of my practice, probably about 50% of the practice is children and adolescents and teenagers. And then the other 50 to 45% maybe is adults. So I'm pretty active, and I do a lot of activity with the state in terms of utilization review and reviews of other psychiatrists when needed as well.
Because I think I met you at there was some church I went to out in West Austin.
Well, I'm glad it was a church.
Yeah, I was wondering,
There's some kind of meeting they were having there.
Out in West Austin.
Yeah, and we ran to you on the parking lot or somewhere.
Oh, that was with Ron the Finney.
Yeah,
that was with Ron the Finney. That's right.
Yeah.
That was maybe out Lakeway.
Yeah,
it was
Lakeway.
A community meeting they were having. That's right.
It was a pro-life place. I just remember that. I remember seeing the pro-life signs in there, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah. That was a good experience. That was a good experience. It was I think that meeting brought a lot of awareness to some of the people there had an awareness, but a lot didn't. And I think that when they were listening to Rhonda, and who was the other young lady that was there,
I forget, she was a lawyer, I think. There was another lawyer that was there.
But they had their own experiences of being alienated through the courts from their children. And a lot of the people that were in attendance, they weren't aware. I think what happens in our society is that these divorce issues or family issues are kind of labeled as, you know, that's a personal problem. You know, they're having a personal problem. But when you finally experience it, then you realize there's much more to this, quote, personal problem. And actually, what goes on with kids and families is a societal issue. It's just, in the past, not much talked about, but more and more it is.
It's like it's systemic.
It's systemic, and
Now
there's much more awareness.
it's codified.
Yes.
That's the scary part.
Yes. It's a codified absence of a parent.
I've been to several Section 8 housing areas in Houston. One of the things that I noticed is that there aren't no fathers around, and that's because they're restricted from actually being a part of the child's life in their actual home life. And it's got to change. There's a lot of problems.
You can't get Section 8 help if a man is around.
No. And, you know, there's a lot of men and women out there in uniform that do everything they can to try to help the child. And most of them raise hundreds of kids that are not even their own. I mean, they get involved with juvenile at a young age, who's having problems, and they see him throughout his adult life until he goes out on his own. But they try to do so much in raising some of these kids because the courts they remove a parent. And that is detrimental to
well,
the
I think as my
development of the child.
conservative friends begin to discover ways to try to reduce societal costs in the long run, it may lead to a more positive atmosphere of making the changes in the family law code that need to be changed. Just so it's to strengthen families rather than weaken them. To strengthen children's lives rather than weaken them. I think that's coming. It won't come fast enough.
I think that one of the aspects that is counter to that is it involves the litigation system and how levels of evidence are related to that, how decisions are made. Really, the number of parents that are alienated from their children by the courts, let's say a certain percentage, they go through the child custody evaluators and they make some determination. And I think if their levels of evidence were much higher to prove whether there was really harm to the child, not just based upon conjecture.
Clear and convincing evidence.
Clear and convincing, the number of parents that would be alienated from their children and vice versa, children alienated from their parents would be much less. I think there is that human factor, that human mistake factor that goes on as well, but it's a costly human mistake factor to the kids.
It costs a life, man.
It costs a life.
It costs a life.
You know, as we touched upon earlier, there's a lot of people working with the issue of 2503 and doing some phenomenal work, and they're working with the DA's Association, meeting with the DAs, just exhaustive work. And I think in terms of law enforcement, I'm sure they get real tired of all these calls. It's phenomenal. Like in one county, whether it was up in Dallas, you know, they might get 1,500 2503 calls in a month that they don't enforce. But if you, and Orlando I think can speak to this more, you know, what's the average career length of a police officer? You know, he has to go out to a home when the child's 5. If a parent is withholding, it might be a very good investment to enforce because he's more than likely going to be at that child's home when he's 15, when there could potentially be much more dangerous situation.
And you try to get, when you see a problem child, because you've already seen so many before, you know what a good time is to get involved in that child's life.
Right.
And it's always at the early stages. Early stages. And it's odd because in Texas, if you're under the age of 3, that's when they automatically just remove the parent.
And we don't know why. There's no data, there's no scientific evidence to justify why they do that.
Right.
You know, until recently, actually, it's been shown. I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's been shown more and more that overnights with a non-custodial parent and the child are particularly important in infancy and toddler age kids. versus what they're doing now. And through a lot of research, nobody knows how they came up with the age of 3 as the cutoff point.
And you know, I spoke a lot with my wife during our litigation. I talked to her a lot about that it was important for my son to have overnights with me because he needed to see how I prepared him for bed, how I prepared his dinner, and take him a bath and put him in his PJs, and how I read stories so he can go to sleep. And then same thing in the morning. It was important that he saw that I got him up and I prepared him and just changed him, and I prepared him for the day and made his breakfast. And I would remind my ex that I'm not only raising my son, but I'm also raising somebody's husband. I'm also raising somebody's brother and somebody's father. I said, these are the things. I said, I don't do this for me. I mean, the easiest thing in the world is to be single and not have parental responsibilities.
Right.
But as a fit, willing, and able parent, it's just something that we do. We have to prepare our children for the lives that they're going to lead as adults. So I would constantly tell her about that. I said, look, I'm raising somebody's husband. I got to do it right. I got one chance, one chance. And say, I'm raising somebody's father. This is the only opportunity that I get. He needs to know what his father did for him is required for him to do for his children.
Right.
I said, so overnight, I said, that's critical. It's critical in a child's life.
And it's something that the child becomes adapted to the parent becomes, so to speak, adapted to the child, and how they do things, they learn about each other. And you don't have that opportunity with 3 or 4 hours once a week. That is not the same delivery
And 3 or
of
4 hours
parenthood.
doesn't count as a day.
No, 3 or 4 hours does not count as a day. Neither does an hour count as a day.
Yeah.
Neither does a minute of eyeball to eyeball count as a day. With the ability to
I still laugh.
to
crack up on the
put your
eyeball.
child to sleep and wake your child up and all the
I
things
heard
that parents do.
the example that if I spent 2 hours with my wife in the morning and I just went throughout my day saying I spent the entire day with my wife, she'd be upset. She'd be upset.
Right.
Because that is a lie. I'm lying about that.
I think it's absolutely important that those of us who work and involve ourselves in the family law arena continue to push our efforts and try to consolidate our efforts and try to connect to one another as much as possible and connect organizations that are interested in the kind of work we're doing. I really have to commend Rhonda Finney for this show and all the shows this season pretty much, because she is the one who got me to focus on family, and because of her pushiness, let's say, it made me reevaluate what kind of law I want to practice.
Right.
Because for some reason I just like lost causes. I like to give people hope and help people.
Right.
That's what I like. That's where I get my kicks.
Right.
That's I like the money. The money's all right, but I'd rather it's nothing like seeing a smile and a crying happy face.
Right.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
There's not enough money in the world to replace that. And the way of helping people in a positive way and getting positive outcomes are what life is all about as far as I'm concerned. It's about trying to do good. Do good, get kicked in the teeth. And maybe you can grow some more teeth, who knows, who cares?
That's right. Good thoughts, good words, good behavior.
Yeah. It's about doing good and doing what's right. That's why it took. I guess that's why it took me 3 months to think of writing the name of the show, Right Talk. Let's get it right. Let's get down to the truth. Let's get some right results and help some folks. That's just my own little trip. But I think it's important to try to get things right and to try to do things positively and to help others. They tell us that as Christians, that's what we're supposed to do, and it just feels good, really.
How do you relate that to the state of Texas?
That's another segment.
I hope that I can only pray that our legislators are thinking about positive outcomes as they go about their daily duties of doing what they do. And I really would like to see that kind of take hold among legal professionals, because there's so much that we influence and that rides on what we do or don't do, or what we say or don't say, or what we achieve or don't achieve. There's so much that rides. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with this profession, but it's best if it's done properly and right, with a view toward doing something positive in the end.
Right.
But I don't know that many of my brothers feel that way. Many of them feel like just get the money and run.
Yeah.
One good friend of mine was telling me, well, Mike, you have a license to steal. that's not how, I never thought of it that way.
Right.
But then when I see how some of these family law professionals operate, it makes me, maybe he had a point there. Maybe that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, guys you get someone in a very emotional situation and
Mm-hmm.
it's emotionally charged, you can get some good money out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to me, that's like extortion. That's like stealing.
Mm-hmm.
To me,
Right.
maybe that's my problem. But
I think there are
I'd
some
rather,
good
I'd
attorneys
rather,
out
I'd
there.
rather have that problem.
There's a lot of closeted attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of closeted attorneys that support shared parenting, but they remain in the closet because they know if they come out, they're going to be outcasts.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to become outcasts really quick. And you know, some are just starting off. They got a good head on their shoulders, but they don't want to risk their practice so fast.
Yeah.
And say, wait, get it passed, and then I'll advocate publicly for it. So well, and you know, I tell the parents that I work with all the time is that fear is a principal impediment to progress.
Mm-hmm.
If you're fearful of something, you focus on the risks.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to stop that. You need to realize that that's going on, and if you stop that, I mean, there's so much progress that you can make by just doing away with fear. And then I remind them also, God, when we're born, He only gave us 2 fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. That is it. Everything else we learn through experience or hearsay. It's just third-hand information somebody else gave us, but that's it. That's all we have: fear of falling,
I
and fear of
believe
loud
that fear
noises.
is really a result of the absence of faith in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have faith in what you're doing and you trust yourself and trust in what you're trying to do, I think that could eliminate a lot of fear. I want to thank you guys for being on my show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And
Thanks for
we
the
have to
invitation.
do it again. I hope you can
honor.
come back on March 25th.
Love to.
So we can
Thank you,
so
sir.
we can chew the fat
Thanks.
with James
Thank
White
you.
Sounds good. Thank you. again.
about what role we can play in helping him get some of these right results that we talked about.
Absolutely.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Orlando.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry we didn't get to talk at the seminar, but
We were all, I mean, it was a busy day.